Hello, my young readers, and welcome back to the channel. And if you're new, welcome. Well, we're going to end this month like we started this month with a Thomas and his friends story. So sit back, relax, and we'll get started. Stay tuned. The name of this story is called Thomas and the Great Discovery. It was a beautiful day on the island of Sodar. Thomas was high in the hills bringing some freight cars to the wharf. At an unfamiliar juncture, he saw an old, overgrown track that looked like a shortcut. Soon, he was rattling down the steep track. No one has been here for a very long time, he huffed. Then Thomas gasped. Fizzling fireboxes! He had arrived at a station. It too was overgrown, rusty, and very old. There were crumbling platforms, and the station building was covered in ivory. Thomas had never seen such an amazing sight. What a funny place to have a station, he peeped and looked around some more. There are so many buildings, it looks like an old town, he cried. I cannot wait to tell everyone about this. So Thomas bumped and bashed along an old track and finally made his way down to the wharf. The next day, the news of Thomas's discovery was all over Sodar. Sir Topham Hatt wanted to visit the hidden town at once.
Thomas, you have made a wonderful discovery. This was the town of Great Waterton. When steam engines first came to Sodar, Sir Topham Hatt said, this was an important town. It was called Great Waterton because the springs here provided water for everyone on the island. Why does no one live here now? Puffed Thomas. The springs ran dry, and the people left to live in new towns. The maps were lost. Everyone thought the town of Great Waterton was lost forever, too.
But now it is found, cheered Thomas.
And if we work hard, added Sir Topham Hatt, we can have the rededication of the town on Sodar Day.
In no time, all of Sodar was working hard to fix up Great Waterton. Because Thomas had rediscovered the town, Sir Topham Hatt put him in charge of all the repair work. It was also Thomas's responsibility to explore all the old tracks around Great Waterton. Thomas liked checking old lines, and he liked being in charge. He wanted to show everyone he could do everything. But one day, there was trouble. Thomas was puffing too fast, and the track was too old. He toppled off the track. Harvey came to lift him back on, but Thomas was bumped and bruised and had to go to the works. While Thomas was at the works, a friendly new engine named Stanley was put in charge of the work at Great Waterton. When Thomas was good as new, he hurried back to the Great Waterton. A lot had changed. Sir Topham Hatt met Thomas.
Stanley has done a good job, so I decided that Stanley will stay in charge and you will help him.
Thomas' funnel flattened. He had lost the most important job of all. The next day, Stanley asked Thomas to shunt some freight cars. Thomas was very good at shunting freight cars, and he really liked doing it. But he didn't like Stanley telling him what to do. Still, he wanted to show how really useful he was. So he shunted freight cars all over Great Waterton. Then he remembered seeing an old freight car stuck in front of the abandoned Morgan's mine. "I'll bring that one in, and Sir Topham Hatt will give me my old job back." Thomas smiled. At last, Thomas found the old freight car, and he buffled it up. But he biffed the car too hard. It rolled forward and disappeared into the mine. "Cinders and ashes!" exclaimed Thomas. "Where did it go?" He moved ahead and peered inside. "I must finish the job," he huffed. "I'll soon find that freight car." And Thomas puffed into the mine. It was very dark. Thomas was happy he had a bright lamp. He looked ahead and saw the freight car rolling away down a slope. Then it disappeared around a bend. "Bust my buffers!" puffed Thomas. "I'd better go after it." Thomas whizzed down the steep slope. "Whee!" he whistled. And "Whoa!" he cried. It was scary, but it was also very exciting. Thomas had almost caught up to the freight car. "You won't get away from me!" he whistled happily. But Thomas didn't notice the junction ahead. The freight car whizzed to the right, but Thomas sped to the left and saw that the tunnel ahead was blocked. "Oh no!" cried Thomas, and he crashed straight through the blocked tunnel and jumped the track. Now, Thomas was deep in the mine in a dark tunnel. To top it all off, his fire had gone out. His boiler would soon grow cold, and there was no one around to hear his whistle. The next morning, Stanley and the other engines arrived for work. "Where's Thomas?" Stanley asked. The engines looked around. Thomas wasn't there. Thomas was missing. It was the biggest calamity Soldar had ever known. Everyone looked for Thomas. They searched the quarries. They searched the docks. They toured every town. They scoured every hill and hunted in every valley. But Thomas was nowhere to be found. And then Stanley had a thought. Maybe Thomas is up on the forgotten tracks around Great Waterton. I'll look for him there. When Stanley was high up in the hills, he whistled and whistled. "Where are you, Thomas?" But only his echo came back. Stanley looked everywhere. Then he spotted Morgan's mine. Could Thomas have gone into the mine? Stanley wondered. He whistled one last time, and this time Thomas heard him. "It's Stanley!" he gasped. With his very last puff, his very last huff, Thomas blew his whistle as loudly as he could, and Stanley heard him. He slowly entered the dark mine. "Thomas," he whistled happily, "is that you?" Thomas had run out of puff. He couldn't whistle again. He could only wait and hope that Stanley would find him. It wasn't long before Thomas heard Stanley chuffing up behind him. "Stanley," he peeped, "I'm very happy that you're here." "Thomas," whistled Stanley, "I'm very happy to find you. Where have you been?" "I was trying to be a really useful engine," tooted Thomas. "Don't worry, Thomas," Stanley chuffed. "I'll have you back on the track in no time." Soon, Stanley was coupled up to Thomas. He pulled and tugged. Thomas was heavy, but Stanley didn't give up. "I can do it," Stanley wheezed, and with a mighty heave, he pulled his friend back onto the track. "Hooray!" Thomas tooted. Then there was a very loud crack. The valve in Stanley's boiler had burst. Stanley was a strong engine, but pulling Thomas had been too much. Now Stanley couldn't move. "Don't worry," whistled Thomas. "It's my turn to help you. With your coal, I can push you home." Stanley smiled. In no time at all, Thomas' boiler was bubbling and his steam was wheezing. Thomas found an open siding, got behind Stanley, and started to push. "Here we go, Stanley," Thomas huffed happily. Stanley smiled back, and puff by puff, Thomas pushed Stanley up and out of the mine. The old tracks rattled and creaked, but Thomas didn't mind. He was happy and proud to push his new friend Stanley home. At last, Thomas and Stanley pulled into Great Waterton Junction. Thomas was tired, but he had never felt happier. When the other engines saw Thomas and Stanley, they tooted and whistled, and soon the sound of engine whistles echoed all around Great Waterton. The news quickly spread throughout Sodar. Thomas had been found. The engines whistled. Sir Topham Hatt grandly proclaimed, "Stanley saved Thomas, and Thomas saved Stanley." For the next couple of days, everyone worked hard to get Great Waterton ready for Sodar Day. Now Thomas was happy that Stanley had come to Sodar. Thomas had a wonderful new friend. And just in time, everything was done. The weather for Sodar Day was perfect. Sir Topham Hatt arrived and beamed. "Well done to you all. This is the grandest Sodar Day ever." He and Lady Hatt stood beside the red ribbon with a great big pair of scissors. "Thanks to Thomas, Great Waterton is no longer lost. And thanks to Stanley, the work was finished right on time. Welcome to the town of Great Waterton," boomed Sir Topham Hatt. Lady Hatt snipped the ribbon. "We're all really useful engines," puffed Thomas happily. He couldn't have been prouder. Well, that ends our story, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Well, you know I did.
I do, because I know you love the Thomas stories.
Well, they have great takeaways.
Well, speaking of takeaways, this story had some really great ones. Let's talk about how proud Thomas was when he made that discovery.
Well, who wouldn't be proud to discover a whole city?
Yeah, you're right. And his was running through my mind. How did you lose a whole city?
Now that you mention it, I'm thinking, maybe the island of Sodar has so many cities that they can lose one here and there.
Yeah, but the thing I really thought was so cool was that Sir Topham Hatt instantly promoted Thomas. When he got promoted, not only was he responsible for the repair work or in charge of it, but he also had the responsibilities of checking out all the old tracks in the city.
Yeah, he did. And unfortunately, it seemed like he was the only one, doing the checks on these rickety tracks. And when he had the accident, it cost him his position.
Yeah, and I really felt for Thomas because all the engines on the island of Sodar really believe in being useful engines. And when he got promoted, that really just made him feel good, had him feeling proud. But when he got back to only learn that the person that, stepped in to keep the job going is the person that Sir Topham Hatt is going to keep in that position, which meant it took it away from Thomas. And now Sir Topham Hatt, I don't think he realized how, disappointed Thomas was that now Thomas is going to be reporting to that engine,
Stanley. Right. And, he really hurt Thomas. My buddy was hurting to the point that he went back out there to try to find something that would get him his position back. That's why he ended up getting lost or stuck in that mine when he went after that last freight car.
Mm-hmm. That last freight car is what did it in for Thomas. But Stanley, oh my goodness. Stanley, he's a really good engine too, because he went after Thomas and could figure out where to go and actually find Thomas and help Thomas get back. But not only did that happen, but it also shined a light on Thomas, that Thomas was able to return the favor right away and help Stanley. So the two worked well
And
together.
you know what? That might have been Sir Top Hand's plan all along when Thomas got back.
And it's not a bad plan that Sir Topham had put them together. It's just that Thomas felt like when he told him he's going to report to Stanley, he didn't like that.
And I totally get it. So if you're listening, Thomas, I'm on your side. Well, little darling, I have got to go. We have come to that time. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!
Well, there goes Tri-Angel. Well, we hope that you all enjoyed this story. It was a really great one, I thought. Well, until next time, my young readers, I am your little darling narrator, out.